Investigators believe the killer is an educated white man in his 30s or 40s, married or with a girlfriend who knows the South Shore of Long Island well, either living there now or previously. They surmise he is comfortable financially, owns a car or truck needed to transport victims, and has easy access to burlap sacks, working with a garden center or a nursery. They believe he is tech-savvy and familiar with police methods, either working in law enforcement or has friends who do. This quote is a profile of the Gilgo Beach serial killer in Long Island, New York, who is still on the loose. In the United States today, profiling has become a main character in movies and TV shows such as The Silence of the Lambs, The Profiler, and Criminal Minds. However, the typical Hollywood hype has made profiling out to be more glamorous and accurate than it actually is. Through my research, I have unearthed the truths about profiling. Today, I will inform you of the definition of profiling, the phases of profiling, and the goals of profiling. First, let's define profiling. Psychological profiling is the process of examining evidence at a crime scene to develop a description of the offender, usually known as the unknown subject or unsub. Profiling is said to have its beginnings in the 1880s when George Phillips and Thomas Bond predicted the personality of Jack the Ripper, a British serial killer. Since then, profiling has been used in the United States to investigate crimes such as sexual assaults, sexual homicides, motiveless fires, rapes, and threatening anonymous communications. Most profilers today are FBI special agents. Profilers consider evidence, witness reports, and victim testimony if the victim is still alive to reconstruct the crime. Through crime reconstruction, profilers can gain greater insight into the psychological and demographic factors of the offender. Psychological factors include personality traits, mental illnesses, and behavioral tendencies. Demographic factors include age, race, gender, and geographical location. For example, since the Gilgo Beach killer dumps his victims all along the South Shore of Long Island, they presume he is comfortable with the area, either living there now or previously. Profiling is more of an art than a science. Profilers analyze past cases to group offenders into different types. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has interviewed 36 serial killers in the last 25 years to theorize and categorize offender types. FBI agent Greg McCrary told the American Psychological Association the basic premise is that behavior reflects personality. If reconstruction of a new crime scene shows similar behaviors to a past crime scene, the offenders most likely share personality characteristics. Next, let's go through the phases of profiling a murder case. There are 4 main phases of profiling a murder case: antecedent, method and manner, body disposal, and post-offense behavior. First, profilers look at the antecedent. They try to decide if the offender was fulfilling a fantasy or a premeditated plan. They also try to find a trigger, something that happened in his or her life that prompted him or her to take action. Next, profilers examine the method and manner of the crime. They look at the victim and try to decide why that victim was chosen. They also look at the modus operandi, or MO, which also means method of operation. MOs include actions like stabbing, shooting, strangulation, or abduction. Signature is different from MO in that signatures are not necessary to carry out the crime. Pat Brown, one of the nation's few female profilers, wrote in her book, The Profiler, "I think signature elements are not about something they had to do. It's something they wanted to do, yes, something that amused them at the time of the crime. Signatures include actions like taking something from the victim or leaving something at the crime scene. In the case of the Gilgo Beach killer, his signature involves calling the victim's family off of her own cell phone within days of her disappearance." Third, profilers examine how the body was disposed. They look at how many scenes were involved in the crime. They also look at body positioning. If the body is positioned face up, it usually shows remorse, while a body positioned face down shows no remorse. Finally, profilers stay alert for post-offense behavior. The offender may try to inject himself or herself into a crime. They may be bystanders when the body is found, or they may volunteer to help in a search party to find the victim. Finally, let's look at the goals of profiling. There are 3 main goals of profiling. The first goal is to provide the police force with a social and psychological evaluation of the offender. They predict the race, age, gender, employment, religion, marital status, and education of the offender. This prediction helps reduce the number of suspects and can help predict the time and location of future attacks. Once there's a suspect, profilers provide the police force with a psychological evaluation of the offender's possessions. This goal is useful when there's a prime suspect because possessions found on the prime suspect can be used in trial as evidence. For example, some necklaces and earrings were taken from the Gilgo Beach killer's victims. If investigators can find these items in the killer's possession, they can prove that he was the killer. The third goal is to provide suggestions and strategies for interviews. Different personalities will respond differently to interview strategies. It is important to choose tactics that will elicit cooperation from each specific offender. Knowing the personality of an offender through a profile can help investigators prepare a more effective interview. In conclusion, profiling is the art of examining evidence of a crime scene to present a description of the offender to the police. We discussed not only the definition of profiling, but also the 4 main phases of profiling a murder case and the 3 goals of profiling. As you can see with the Gilgo Beach killer, profiling does not lead to an immediate arrest of a suspect. It simply helps police focus in on a certain type of person. But with 7 billion people in the world, 319 million people in the United States, 20 million people in New York, and 7.5 million people in Long Island, it can be hard to find the one that fits the profile.